Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Getting Off Gas, Electrify Your Home. My name is Neil Lackey, and I'm happy to be your host for tonight's webinar, which is being co-hosted by the Nith Valley EcoBoosters and Reep Green Solutions. We want to thank our supporters for this event. It is with sincere thanks that we name the Township of Wilmot, Kindred Credit Union, and the Future Ground Network, which is a project of the David Suzuki Foundation. So why a webinar on getting off gas? Of all the actions households can take to respond to the climate crisis, the most important is to fuel swap, meaning to stop using fossil fuels in our structures. In particular, we need to stop using natural gas. Gas is a polluting fossil fuel that produces harmful carbon dioxide, that's CO2, emissions. Going all electric isn't just good for your wallet and the climate, it's also good for your family's health, since the use of gas for heating and cooking indoors carries health risks. So now I'm going to briefly introduce our keynote speaker. I'm pleased to introduce Heather McDermott. Heather is the founder of McDermott Climate Consulting, located here in Waterloo Region. She specializes in researching, analyzing, and communicating climate mitigation solutions for homes. She has a PhD in biochemistry and a Master of Climate Change. It's no surprise that she is the proud owner of an all-electric home, and if she ever moves, she's taking that induction cooker with her. We are fortunate to have someone with Heather's experience and knowledge to guide us through the journey to get off gas. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Neil. I'll just share my screen and get things started. I'm guessing you can see it now. Somebody want to give me a thumbs up?
Yep, you're good, Heather.
All good, thanks, Tom. Okay, so I'm Heather McDermott from McDermott Climate Consulting, and I'm going to tell you all about getting off gas and how to electrify everything in and around your home, because it's not just your furnace that burns fuel, burns gas. There are other things too, and every bit counts. So if you're not ready to replace your gas furnace, maybe you have a relatively new one, there are other things you can do. So as I just mentioned, gas and other fossil fuels are common in homes. And here's a list of some of the places that you might be using fossil fuels in your home. And I encourage you to share in the chat what types of things are using gas and fossil fuels in and around your home. And of course, you know, that's space heating, that's water heating. It may be a dryer. You may have stove that runs on gas, fireplace, outdoor lawn equipment, lawnmowers. It's time to, you know, pull out your lawnmower and get it set for the summer season. And maybe it's time to replace it. There are electric lawnmowers that do a great job. There are also electric snow blowers out there. That was really exciting to learn about. And electric barbecues, electric generators, well, not just about, everything in and around your home that currently uses fossil fuels can be electrified. And I'm going to go through some of the big ones today. But just to recap, and Neil did a very nice job of describing some of the reasons why we want to get off of natural gas, but I thought I would recap. Natural gas is a fossil fuel. Don't be fooled by the natural in its title. It is a fossil fuel. It consists of methane, which is itself a greenhouse gas. So carbon dioxide is generated when natural gas is burned, but when natural gas leaks, the methane is actually far more potent than carbon dioxide at warming our planet. It's something like 80 times worse than carbon dioxide on a 20-year time frame. And maybe right now, what might be more concerning to people is the fact that here in Ontario, 70% of our natural gas is actually coming from the United States. So if you're trying to avoid products from the US right now, natural gas might be one of the ones you want to consider. Natural gas is also in itself an environmental pollutant, apart from the fact that it's a fossil fuel. This should be particular concern for people who have family members with asthma or respiratory illness. There is very good science to show that cooking with gas generates indoor air pollutants that are linked to asthma. It generates a whole pile of nasty compounds, things like benzene, nitrogen oxides, fine particulate matter, the stuff that we have really concerned about getting deep into our lungs. And those can all make things like asthma worse and respiratory illnesses. But even if you're not cooking with gas, if you are burning gas, you are generating pollution. All gas appliances generate outdoor pollution that can contribute to the health burden in our society and premature deaths. The extraction of natural gas is also a form of pollution for air, water, and land. And of course, as I mentioned, natural gas generates greenhouse gases when it's burned, but also when it's extracted and distributed. And it is a growing source of emissions in Canada. So this is looking at historical emissions in Canada. And you can see that that green bar is getting bigger. We are replacing a lot of coal, some of our oil with gas, and it's not necessarily a good thing. So if we want to get off of natural gas and we want to get off of other fossil fuels, the biggies are space and water heater. So here in Ontario, if you look at energy use, more than half of the energy we use in our home is just to keep it warm in wintertime. Roughly 20% of our energy use goes to water heating. But if we look at the greenhouse gas emissions from a typical, well, from residential buildings in aggregate in Ontario, nearly 3/4 of the direct emissions are from space heating, and nearly 1/4 of it is water heating. So those truly are the biggies when it comes to climate pollution from our homes. So in short, why do we want to electrify everything? It reduces greenhouse gas emissions. It improves energy efficiency. We can also save money in many cases, not all. Better health and safety. And, you know, I think, to me, what we really ought to be talking a lot about is that the electric alternatives are just simply better. They're better equipment. So even if climate change is not your top priority, even if energy efficiency is really not on your radar, health and safety, you're not concerned about it, this is better equipment. And that's something that maybe we should all be paying more attention to. So as I see it, the future is electric. It's time to ditch the fuels. So let's get down into some of the equipment that we might be thinking about. And we'll start with the biggies. So heat pumps. As far as I'm concerned, all homes will have heat pumps in future. And the simple reason for that is because they are the best option available for heating and cooling a home. They are the most energy efficient way to heat a home. You can get both heating and cooling with a heat pump with no carbon monoxide risk. Heating with a heat pump provides better home comfort. They're suitable for all homes. Every home in the region can absolutely shift to a heat pump, no question. No matter how old it is, no matter what shape it is, you can get a heat pump that will work in it. And it helps you pass on gas and therefore save the connection fee. Now, I wanted to pause on the better home comfort, because this is something that took me by surprise when we installed our heat pump over 4 years ago. So I was not expecting a change in home comfort when we made that switch, but I am more comfortable in my home. And one of the reasons is that with a gas furnace, what you get is a big blast of heat whenever the furnace turns on, and then the furnace turns off and it shuts down. Excuse me, just one second. Sorry about that, there was something at the door. Okay, so you get a blast of warm air with the furnace, and then it shuts off, and the temperature fluctuates. It goes up and it goes down. And if you're smart, you turn down the thermostat at night and the temperature goes down. And then the furnace comes on before you get up so that the air temperature warms up in your home so that it's in theory nice and cozy when you get out of bed. But at night, when you put your setbacks on, everything in your home cools off. Your walls and your floors and your ceilings and your furniture, everything cools off during that time. And even though the air blowing into your home may be warm and you may have warmed up the air, everything else is still cooler. And you actually lose a lot of your comfort has to do with radiative heat loss to all those surfaces. So if those surfaces are cooler, you're going to be losing more heat to them. And that's going to make you feel less comfortable. With a heat pump, you have more even heat. So you don't get a blast of hot air, you get steady warm air. So it's not bouncing up and down, and then you don't use setbacks. And because you don't use setbacks, your walls, your surfaces, your furniture all stays warm, and you don't have that uncomfortableness from heat radiating to those surfaces. I'm told some of you like technical stuff. That was getting pretty technical. And not all of this is going to be technical, but I do want to make, for those of you who sort of want to know how does a heat pump work, I wanted to cover that in just a few details. This is a really nice diagram from Natural Resources Canada. And it highlights how we've got this cycle where we're moving refrigerant between the outside box with a heat pump and the inside air exchanger or air handler. And what the refrigerant does is it picks up heat in the outside in the wintertime when it expands and vaporizes. So, you know, if you want to boil water, you're going to convert it from liquid to a gas, you have to add heat. The water is absorbing that heat as it moves from liquid to a gas. With a refrigerant, it's picking up heat from the outside as it expands and vaporizes. And then you move that vaporized refrigerant inside and you compress it and you forcing it back to its liquid state where it gives up the heat that it picked up earlier. And that's how you're able to move heat from one place to another. And this is why you're able to have heat pumps be 300% efficient. When I first heard that heat pumps could be 300% efficient, I thought the person was crazy. They're claiming the heat pumps can break the laws of thermodynamics, and there was something wrong. But then I learned it absolutely can be 300% efficient because it's moving heat, not generating heat. And that was the point where I fell in love with heat pumps, by the way. So this technology that uses the refrigerant that switches between the vapor phase and the liquid phase it's the same technology that's found in your fridge, your freezer, and your air conditioner. And if you trust your freezer to keep your foods frozen and solid, you should trust your heat pump, because in a freezer, what it's doing is it's pulling heat out of your food at minus 21 degrees Celsius and pumping that heat into a room that's plus 20 degrees Celsius, which is exactly what we're asking a heat pump to do in our region on the very coldest days. So if you trust a freezer to do that, you can trust a heat pump to do exactly that, even on the coldest days in our region. What's critical if you're looking to buy a heat pump is that you want to get a good heat pump. And here, one of the things that is really critical is the quality of the installation. When you're looking to get quotes, when you're looking to get information on a heat pump from your home, you want to make sure that the installer knows what they're doing, that they are picking a good product and they're picking the right size product, and they're investing the time to install it right. So some of the things that you want to be looking for is, are they doing a heating load calculation for their home, for your home? Are they going by rule of thumb, which works just fine with furnaces? Vast majority of them are way oversized and people don't realize it. Or are they tailoring it to the needs of your home by doing a heating load calculation? Are they looking at your ductwork? You want them to be looking at the airflow capacity of the ductwork. You want to make sure that the heat pump is not oversized for the ductwork, because that will lead to noisy heat pump operations, less efficiency, wearing out of the equipment. You want that installer to ask you about your priorities. So how they size it, how they, the type of equipment that they will choose should be tailored to whether you are looking for cost savings, emissions reductions, whether you're planning to keep your existing furnace, get rid of it. Those are your priorities. And they should be offering at least an all-electric option or explaining why it's not appropriate for your home. I will be coming back to how to get how to pick good equipment again at the very end, and I have some links on the handout that's going out later this week that will help you to ask the right questions. But one of the shortcuts, one of the things that you can do today is to look for Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Institute Heat Pump Champion Advocate. These are installers that have had extra training on heat pumps that have made a commitment to advocate for heat pumps here in Ontario. So that's one thing that you can look for. If you want a good heat pump, you want a heat pump that is providing the majority of the heat for your home, you should be looking for heat pumps that are cold climate rated. That means that they are designed to perform well at very low temperatures. The efficiency, you're looking for an HSPF, that's a heating system performance factor. And this is version 2, that's why it's got the 2 at the end of it. We're in region 5, that just says that we are in a colder climate than most of the US. So we are HSPF region 5 of greater than 6.6. That is kind of the baseline for a good heat pump in terms of efficiency. That was the minimum requirement for the Greener Homes Grant when it was running, and it's the minimum requirement, as far as I know, for the Enbridge incentives that are available right now. You also want high cooling efficiency. The value you're looking for there is a SEER, seasonal energy efficiency value of 2, and that's greater than or equal to 15.2. But generally, if you're over 6.6 on the HSPF 2, you will be over 15.2 on the SEER value. Okay, that's heat pumps. And as I said, the 2 biggies are space and water heating. So let's move to water heating next. It's second for energy emissions. And you have lots of options here. You can go for a very simple electric tank water heater. That's what I opted for in my home. It has the lowest upfront cost, but it is the least energy efficient of all of the options. It's still 80-something% efficient. And that's because it's going to be losing some heat through the tank. That's where it loses its efficiency. But, you know, it can be a really good option for most homes. There are electric tankless heat pumps, not heat pumps, electric tankless water heaters. And, you know, I don't actually recommend those ones. They're great in that they take up very little space in your home, but where they are, their weakness is that they hog a lot of space on your electrical panel. It takes a lot of power to heat up water very fast. And in order to supply that power, you need to take a lot of, it takes a lot of amps off of your electrical panel. That may trigger an electrical panel upgrade now, or it may trigger an electrical panel upgrade in the future as you electrify other equipment. And that can be fairly expensive. So I'm not a big fan of that option. Heat pump water heaters can be a great option. They are by far the most energy efficient system, water heating system out there. They can be 300 to 400% efficient. They come with a higher upfront cost. But one of the things to keep in mind with the heat pump water heater is it takes a little longer to heat the water up. So if you've gone and had a shower and ran a bunch of laundry and you've depleted the hot water in the tank, it will take longer for that water to heat back up again than other options. And so one of the things that they recommend that you do is that you upsize to the next larger size when you're switching from any other, you know, gas or electric tank water heaters to a heat pump and that water heater, and there you will have more hot water available. You're going to have that buffer against running out. Really exciting to me is these new 120 volt heat pump water heaters. My next water heater will likely be one of these. The exciting part of it is that it runs on 120 volts. So it runs off of a regular outlet. So when you're switching from a gas water heater to an electric water heater, you often don't have an outlet, like a 240 volt outlet or electrical line there to connect a conventional tank or heat pump water heater to. These 120 volt heat pump water heaters are designed for those homes so that you don't need any electrical upgrade when you're switching from gas. So as water heaters, a few other things to keep in mind. The majority of homeowners in Ontario are renting their water heaters today. This is unusual in North America. And study after study demonstrates that you will save far more money by owning your water heater than you will by renting it. You can save even more by using less hot water. Lots of options, and Reep Green Solution has some great information on their websites about how to use less hot water. With electric water heaters, you have the opportunity to take advantage of time of use rates. So this is one of the things that we do. We heat our water at night, and then we just let it coast through the day. And we can take advantage of the really low overnight rates that are available. No vent needed. Gas water heaters require a vent to the outside. Electric water heaters do not, so you can seal that up and get your house more airtight, less air leakage. That means less heat wasted. But as I noted earlier, may require electrical upgrades. And if you're going to a heat pump water heater, just keep in mind it needs some space in the room to extract the heat. You are pulling heat from your home to heat the water. That does mean a slight increase in the space heating needs for the home, but it's not as big as most people fear. And that's partly because your water heater is typically in the basement. And if it's a few degrees cooler than the rest of home, it's not usually a problem. But it does need that extra space in order to pull the heat, extract the heat. And it takes longer to heat, which is why we recommend upsizing. Heat pump water heaters also have an air filter, which is something other water heaters do not have. So it's something to be aware of, to, you know, put a note in your calendar to clean the air filters from time to time. That's electric water heaters. Moving on now. When it comes to cooking, induction wins hands down. I can't say enough good things about induction. I love my induction cooker. So compared to gas stove, there's no toxic combustion gases. It is faster than a gas stove at boiling water. My son did a science fair experiment on this several years ago. He timed it on boiling a liter of water in the same pot on different types of stoves. Induction won hands down. You have, just like with gas, you have instant temperature control. So if you are boiling water for your pasta and it boils over, which will happen because you will be surprised by how quickly that happens, how quickly it comes to a boil, you turn down the heat and it goes shoof. And then you move the pot aside and you can just wipe the surface clean because it isn't anywhere near as hot as a ceramic top or coil top. And you put the pot back on and you're good to go. It's more energy efficient than any of the alternatives, so you're not broiling in your kitchen in the middle of the summertime. It doesn't work with all cookware, but it does work with most cookware. The handy trick is to get yourself just a simple fridge magnet, and if it sticks to the bottom of the pot, it will work on induction. There are some new induction cookers now that actually work with copper and aluminum pots, but they are a bit more expensive. Anyways, my husband came home with a single burner like we see on the screen several years ago and said, I had to try it. And I said, no, I'm too busy. And he went ahead and said, well, okay, I will take over part of the cooking tonight and I'm going to show you just how great it was. And he did. And he got that his share of the dinner cooked so much faster than I ever anticipated that I went, all right, we need one of these. And 2 months later, we had one. And I am never going back to anything else. It is by far the best way to cook. If you're interested in trying one, the Waterloo Region Library now has them single burner cookers available to borrow. So you can bring one home and try for yourself. Dryers are another place where you might still be using gas. And there are some new options available that were not available in the a few years ago. So today we have ventless condensing dryers. So you can seal up that vent to the outside because you don't ever need it. And what it does is it has sort of a dehumidifier built in that extracts the heat from the air, the dryer air before recycling it back into the dryer. There are even heat pump dryers, which of course are more energy efficient. There are 120 volt heat dryers that can plug in anywhere. So if you're moving from gas and don't have that outlet, choose a 120 volt option. And then the one that's really got my mind excited is the idea of a combined washer and dryer, 2 in 1. And these are ventless. I was looking at some on the weekend that are 120 volts, and it's 1 appliance instead of 2. And you put it in the morning, and you turn it on, and you come back at the end of the day, for example, after work, and your laundry is washed and dried, and all you have to do is fold and put away. And that sounds awesome to me. That's electric dryers. They're also electric fireplaces. They are safer, cleaner, smarter. They give you the same sense of cozy comfort and heat, but there's no flame. They're safer to use. There's no soot. There's no smoke. There's no carbon monoxide, no gas leaks, no vents to the outside. Many of them are DIY install. Really, like, they're fantastic. The only benefit, as far as I'm concerned, of a gas fireplace is if you are in an area that it is particularly prone to power outages in the wintertime. A gas fireplace may be the only way that you can get heat in your home. A gas furnace will not work in a power outage, and that's for safety reasons. That might be the only time where I might recommend that you consider keeping gas. Okay, moving on to yard equipment. So, yard equipment, just about everything outside that runs on fuels can be electrified. Well, not just about, everything outside can run on electric. And you have the options of both plug-in electric and battery electric. If you're thinking plug-in, I encourage you to first check where your outlet is. So I live in a semi-detached home, and it's a bit of a pie-shaped lot, and my outside outlet is in the very front of the house near the tiny tip of the pie. So an electrical cord is not a chance going to reach the back of my yard. So that was a consideration. What we ended up doing was running the cord through the window in the back so that we could run it off the outlet inside, but not always an option. And if you're going with a battery option, then I encourage you to look for equipment with interchangeable batteries. So if you get your lawnmower, your snowblower, your leaf blower, your hedge trimmer, all of that equipment from the same company, chances are the batteries will be interchangeable, and then you don't have to invest in a whole lot of batteries. Really, really big advantage of yard equipment that is electrified is that they're quieter and no air pollution. Of course, you've got no seasonal fuel changes, but there are some municipalities that are now mandating yard equipment be all electric because they're quieter and produce less air pollution. All right, yard equipment. As you're going through all of this, one of the things you need to be you want to keep in the back of your mind is the fact that as you electrify, you're adding more appliances to your electrical panel. And electrical panels have limited capacity, and you want to try to avoid having to upgrade your electrical panel and upgrade the electrical service to your home. And it is absolutely possible to electrify everything in and around a typical home on a 100 amp panel. Most people have 100 amp panels. So absolutely this is possible, but it takes a little bit of planning. So one of the #1 tricks to avoiding electrical panel upgrade is to choose 2-in-1 appliances. And the big one is the stove and the oven. If you separate the stove and the oven, if you have like a countertop stove and a separate oven, they will each require space on your electrical panel. And if they are combined, then they will take up far less space on that panel. Washer dryers are another way to combine appliances. In general, you should be looking for efficient appliances and looking for appliances that use less power. So a heat pump water heater, for example, is going to use far less power than a tankless water heater. The power ratings should be on the equipment as you are shopping for it. You're looking for how many amps they draw. And the watt diet, which is also one of the resources that you're going to be getting later this week, gives some guidance on what is the typical power draw of different appliances and what the ranges are, so that you can do a little bit of planning on that one. But another one of the ones that often triggers that electrical panel upgrade is the EV charger. If you're looking to install an EV charger at some time in the future, there are chargers that you can buy that have very high power outputs that will hog up a lot of space on your electrical panel. Chances are you don't need anywhere near that type of power outlet, because if you're plugging it in a car in at night and you're not using it again until the next morning, a much lower power EV charger will generally charge your car and give you the range, all the range you're going to need for the next day. There are also home chargers on the market that are being promoted as high power charging that your car actually won't benefit from. So there are ones that are 50 amps, for example, where your car, recognizing that it's coming from a home charging system, will max it out at 20 or 30 amps. So you're not even using the full power that the equipment can provide, because your car is programmed not to accept very high power with home charging. So this is one of the concerns that I've heard from some homeowners. So right sizing is really important for your EV charger. And then the next level, that's just, all of that is about reducing the space that you need on your electrical panel, reducing the watts from your equipment. The next stage up is to use dedicated energy management equipment that can help you share some of the space on the panel. Okay. So that is things like load share devices. So the common one is that you put your dryer and your EV charger on the same circuit. And you can only run one at a time, but chances are you don't need to charge your car at the same time that you're running your dryer. And you can have one that is a priority over another with a load share device. Circuit pausers are subtly different. So they are connected to one appliance that is only allowed to operate when there is capacity on the panel, when the panel is not near its limit. A smart electrical panel is sort of going up the next stage up, where it's balancing all of the loads on a panel. And you can prioritize certain loads over others with a smart electrical panel. And then I'm fitting into this category, smart appliances programmed to add convenience, avoid peaks, and save money. There's one other that I think I mentioned. I thought I had that on this slide, but I don't. So another one I'm going to mention right now. And that is especially if you are putting in a heat pump and you think that it's likely to trigger the need for an electrical panel upgrade, you can ask your electrician to do a historical load calculation. So a 100 amp panel, you can get permission to put up to something like 125 amps on that panel if you can demonstrate that historically you have never needed close to 100 amps at any one time. So that is something to be aware of. It's called the historical load calculation. I wanted to just give a quick shout out to the fact that some of the options that are available are options for renters as well as owners. If you are a renter, there are things you can do. You do have some agency here. I'm really excited by these new heat pumps that fit over a window sill, so they look like a saddle, and they provide both heating and cooling, and without blocking all the window. So those are now commercially available in Canada, and they just plug into a regular outlet so you can take it with you when you move. Single element induction cookers, I think are great. My next home, I'm expecting that I'm just going to ditch the stove and buy 3 of these single burner induction cookers, stick them in a cupboard and just take out however many I need at one time, leaving my countertops free for other things in between. Electric barbecues. Many apartment buildings won't let you put a regular barbecue on a balcony, but electric barbecues are allowed. Community solar is an option, and ventless dryers, because they don't require a vent and because they plug into regular outlets, are an appliance that you can put into a rental unit and take with you when you move. So lots of exciting options available today. I recommend that if you are looking to electrify one or more things in your home, that you create a bit of a plan ahead of time. As starting with sort of looking at what equipment you have in your home, what's their age and condition, so you know you can budget in advance, you can start doing some research in advance, and you're not scrambling at the last minute when the equipment dies trying to figure out how to replace it. The more you plan in advance, just like most things, the better outcomes you're likely to get. This table comes from the Canada's Home Electrification Toolkit, which is going to be in the list of resources you get later this week. It's produced by the Building Decarbonization Alliance, and I was the one who wrote that, so a lot of the content came from that research. So I recommend you start by creating a plan. The Building Decarbonization Alliance's Home Electrification Toolkit gives you some idea of the budget that you're going to need for replacing different equipment. It gives you some idea as well as the operational cost savings potential, the emissions savings potential, and a bunch of the things that you want to be considering with each decision. It doesn't hurt to look at your electrical panel in advance. So your main breaker will give you an idea of the panel size. So 100 amps, really old homes might still have 60 amp service. Most homes have 100 amp service. The next size up is usually 200 amps. You want to look for spare breakers. That gives you some sense of how much more you can add to your panel. If you think you may have to upgrade, you'll want to know what service is coming to your home. So my home had a 100 amp panel, but 200 amp service coming to the home. So that meant that I could upgrade to a 200 amp service without upgrading any of the equipment coming to my home, which can be expensive. And then, yeah, I did think that knew that I was getting back to the historical load calculation. So if you think you're getting close to you may need to upgrade, or you may not have enough space, look into getting a historical load calculation done. You may be able to exceed the rated capacity of your panel if your peak needs are low. So for example, 120 amps on a 100 amp panel. Okay. And then do your research. So this is a picture of Canada's Home Electrification Toolkit. It provides all the information I talked about today and far, far more. It covers the benefits and the challenges of each option that's available, energy and emission savings potential, upfront and operational cost ranges, things that you want to consider when you're looking at installation. And for the major purchases like a heat pump or solar panels, water heaters, we have a list of recommended questions for installers, as well as links to further resources. And then the part that I also think is really, really important, and here is tips for community groups on how to amplify the impact. So it's great if you're thinking about electrifying your home. It's awesome if you do take steps to electrify things around your home, but you're going to have even more impact if you talk about those decisions with your friends, your family, your neighbors, so that you can inspire people and normalize electrification as the way to go, and how these electrified options really are the better options for your home. It's the stories that matter. And then the last thing, of course, get multiple quotes. I always recommend getting at least 3. You want to shop around. For heat pumps, the Heating, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Institute of Canada has a heat pump champion advocate program. Friends can also be a great place for referrals. And don't forget to refer tradespeople who have done a good job to others, people that you know. And look for incentives. So in a few moments, we're going to hear about the Greener Homes Loan. That's up to $40,000 available in zero interest financing available for upgrades to a home, including heat pumps. If you happen to be on oil, there is up to $10,000 grants available today for heat pumps. And then the Home Renovation Savings Program is an Enbridge program. Currently, you have to be an Enbridge customer to access it, unless you are electrically heated. So right now, $500 rebate for heat pump water heaters. You have to get a home audit done first. Up to $2,000 for a cold climate air source heat pump, $3,000 for a ground source heat pump. That's Enbridge customers only, but you don't need a home audit for that. You simply have to work with your installer to access the rebates. If you happen to be an electrically heated home, that bumps up to $7,500 for a cold climate air source heat pump and $12,000 for ground source heat pump. Missing the ground source heat pump there. And you don't have to be an electric Enbridge customer for that one. And again, with these incentives, you have to work with HVAC contractors. So make sure that they are one of the contractors that is working with Enbridge on this program. And as I mentioned earlier, tell others about your journey. Talking about it normalizes electric alternatives. Stories matter more than facts in many cases. And as Catherine Hayhoe, she's a climate scientist from the States who has a huge impact in the field. As she likes to say, the most important thing you can do to fight climate change is to talk about it. And I just wanted to end up with my story. So I like to walk the talk. I installed a cold climate air source heat pump in my home in 2020. That was the last major appliance in my home that gas furnace was the last major appliance in my home running on gas. So we disconnected from the gas supply at the same time. We are now fully electric. That cold climate air source heat pump has made my home more comfortable, both in summer and in winter, much happier. And that cold climate air source heat pump has absolutely been able to keep up with even the coldest days. We have a built-in backup electric resistance heater with the heat pump. It has yet to be used. Not necessary. Couple years ago, we added solar panels to our home. And because we'd done a couple of upgrades to the building envelope, we just added some insulation to the foundation and the attic. We'd done a little bit of simple air sealing around the home. And with the energy efficiency going to the heat pump, our energy usage was low enough that we are able to generate as much electricity from our solar panels as we use in a year for everything. And that means space heating, water heating, cooking, even charging our EV. All of that energy, we are generating enough electricity from our solar panels to offset all of that in a year. Absolutely no regrets, loving it. So as I like to say, upgrade to the best, get electric next. And we're going to hand it over, I think, next to someone who's going to talk about the Greener Homes loans before we get to the Q&A, as I understand it.
Thank you very much, Heather. What a broad look at electrification and personal experience. Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to, just in a moment, introduce Steve Mansky. Steve and his wife, Pat, live in Waterloo, and they have recently gone through the process of applying for a Canada Greener Homes interest-free loan to purchase a heat pump and a heat pump water heater. Steve's going to tell us about their experiences. Perhaps the good, bad, and the ugly, Steve? Go for it.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, I'm just one person, perhaps more naive than some of you, and I think that's perhaps a useful perspective to bring to someone who's considering getting off gas as much as possible. And the specific thing that I'll talk about tonight, Heather has referred to and given you some of the specifics, is the Canada Greener Homes loan and the application process there. There had been a Canada Greener Homes grant, but that is no longer available. So I've got the URL up there, so that would be available once you have a chance to actually see the slides on your own. My goal is just to share our experience and more specifically to describe some of the things you should probably try to avoid, or at least with being forewarned, you'll be able to avoid. So the details of the loan, as Heather mentioned, the maximum amount is $40,000. The minimum amount is 5,000. So if you're doing upgrades that are less than 5,000, then you would not be eligible for the loan. And as she also pointed out, once you get the loan, then you have 10 years to repay that, and there's no interest added. So it's simply the amount of your loan divided by 120, so 120 payments once a month, that then you'll be done in 10 years. And I'll just mention that the application process, I've labeled it as not simple. It's reasonably direct, but there are quite a number of steps that I'll take you through. I'd further just mention that there are some things that are not eligible for the loan. So you can't apply for work that has already been started or completed. You can't apply for retrofits that were not recommended in your pre-retrofit evaluation. And we had Reep come in and do our pre-evaluation. And once you've put in your initial application, you can't then decide, oh, well, I'd like to add this in. That is not possible. So once you've got your approval for a loan, then you can no longer add in anything else. And finally, as Heather mentioned, there are lower quality or lower efficiency retrofits that you might be considering. And the Canada Greener Homes loan, I should have listed, has some specific requirements of what is available. And those are part and parcel of, or your installer should be able to tell you which ones are actually eligible. Then in terms of your own eligibility, this is not something that if you're renting, you can apply for. It must be your home, and you can't make it for a secondary residence. You have to have the pre-retrofit evaluation, but you cannot yet have had a post-retrofit evaluation. That goes with the, you can't apply for things that have already been started or completed. I think that probably everyone in this call has not had a retrofit evaluation done prior to April 1st of 2020. But if you did, then you're not eligible for this, or you have to have it done once again. You must not have started the retrofits for which you're seeking a loan. And then finally, Government of Canada wants to make sure that they get their money back, so you have to show that you have a good credit history. So these are the steps that are included in completing the application. And I will go through each of them, so I won't review them right here, but I just note that it's not a quick process because you're waiting for reports, waiting for approvals throughout the process, and that just lengthens everything out. And I point down at the end that you're going to actually need to repay that loan. So you have to be prepared to do that as well. So the pre-retrofit evaluation, we asked Reep Green Solutions to do that for us. We submitted our request back in 2023, near the end of December. And at that time, Enbridge was finishing up some kind of program. And so the first evaluation that we could book wasn't until March. So that is one of the delays that you need to anticipate. We might get more information from Reep tonight about how long people are needing to wait. And you need to know that the evaluation, the pre-retrofit evaluation, can actually take up to 3 hours. It's a fairly complete look at your home, what it involves and includes. The testing includes a door blower test where they put up a fan at your front door in order to see how much air can be sucked through. So what is the air exchange in your home? And then finally, you need to be prepared for the cost of this pre and post evaluation. The initial assessment is $530. The follow-up assessment is $340 for a total of $870. The federal website shows that there's a $600 rebate available for these costs upon completion of and note the final word, grant. The grants are no longer available. And as I'll point out, the rebate is no longer available either. So once Reep has done their evaluation, this is the kind of report that you'll get. I direct your attention to the red and yellow and green arrows. It points to where you are currently in terms of energy performance, the number of gigajoules that you use or are estimated to use within a year. And with the upgrades that they recommend, what your potential energy use would be. So ours would have moved, or did move from 101 down to 71, where a lower number is the better thing that you're aiming for. Heather mentioned that her house is net zero. It would be great if we could all move towards that. And so the report, in addition to just saying where you're at currently, down in the very bottom of this slide, you'll see that the report identifies your home energy savings opportunities and recommends particular renovation upgrades. And that is then the, I'll say, fuel that you use for your application, because that'll be what you need to get estimates on. So the second step then is to obtain some quotes. And as Heather suggested, getting more than one. We had quite a variation in the different upgrades that we were looking for. We had insulation put in the attic, for example, and the place that we ended up choosing was half the price of two of the other quotes that we obtained. And they were doing more for that price than the others were saying they would do. So it pays to shop around a little bit, to talk to friends who have had a good experience with someone who is doing that kind of work. And similarly, we were, in addition to getting the insulation, we were also getting a heat pump. And we had quite a variety in terms of the kinds of quotes that people were offering. And I think it's more than the dollars that you need to look at. As Heather pointed out, they should be pointing out the kinds of things that you need to consider when you're choosing your particular upgrade. Yeah. Finally, I'll just reiterate that whatever retrofit you're including needs to meet the requirements of the Greener Homes application. So some of the heat pumps, for example, are not rated at the levels that Heather was describing. And there are specific code numbers that are attached to each of the heat pumps in this case that need to be listed on your application, and your installer should be able to tell you, yes, this does meet the requirements that are required, or yeah. So the third step then is to actually submit your application. You can get started on it before you have all your estimates, and that may be worthwhile because there's a little bit of homework you might need to do. My tips, or the tips that are actually from the website, is to make sure your application is complete and accurate. I've already said, don't start the work ahead of time. Make sure that you include all the retrofits you plan to complete. And I have an example of not having done that appropriately. Make sure that the quotes that you get from contractors are clear and show the cost of the eligible energy efficient retrofits. We had one estimate that came in on the back of a business card. That wasn't going to do it. I'm sorry, no, it wasn't even a business card. It had no way that sort of showed that it was actually a legitimate contractor on what he had given us. So I ended up asking for something that was on letterhead, because that ended up being what we chose. But yeah, folks, estimators can be busy and yeah, not quite ready for you. And then the final bullet is the things you need to have ready. You need to have your pre-retrofit number. That is something that was on the report that you got from Reep. You need to be able to show that you have a government ID that includes your address, that sort of shows, yes, I actually do live at this place. You need to have a property tax bill. You need to have a notice of assessment from CRA or some other proof of income. That's the, hey, I actually am going to be able to pay this back. So things like the property tax bill, your notice of assessment are not necessarily things that you're going to have at your fingertips right when you're trying to fill in the application. So just be aware of that. And once you submit your application, then you actually get a report back of what they are going to be approving and what the costs are that you are getting approved for. So we had some do-it-myself work, just to do some air sealing around windows that Reep had pointed out. That was pretty simple and very low cost. We asked for, or Reep had suggested that we improve the insulation in our attic. And so we got a quote from Reitzel to do that. And then chose a heat pump that met the requirements. Someone has asked in the questions, who actually can supply heat pumps, who can supply heat pump water heaters. Well, Fireside Mechanical Service is a business that is based in Baden, and we were very happy with the work that he has done for us. And so you get then a total of the estimated intended retrofits, 7,400 for those three components. And that is the amount then that your loan can amount to. And it's at that point, so you've gotten the approval, that's when you can actually have your retrofits done. So you get the insulation put in, you get the retrofit or heat pump, whatever it is you're doing. And once that's done, then you have to schedule the post retrofit evaluation. And again, there may be a lag time before Reep is able to come and do that assessment. And when you do that, then Reep actually has to be able to see the invoices that indicate clearly what was installed or added, including the qualifications of the folks who were doing the installation. When you're talking with your assessor, the person from Reep who comes to talk to you or do the assessment, listen carefully. Ask lots of questions. If you're not perfectly clear on what is going to be required afterwards. So you need to, for example, submit invoices, and those invoices have to include certain pieces of information. I actually had to go back to the one service that we had and ask for a different invoice because it did not include the specific information that I was going to say Health Canada because I used to work in health, that the application requires. And then my third box down the bottom left-hand green one is check that the invoices were actually sent after the evaluation by Reep. I was sure that I had done this, and I'm waiting around for the response from Reep and to get the go-ahead to actually submit my final request for the loan. And after waiting a month, I still had nothing from it. So I finally checked back in. Oh, no, I never actually had sent them. I guess I hadn't hit send. And unfortunately for me, that meant a delay. So then you're waiting for the Reep response and checking in. And finally, once you've got their update, then you can submit your loan request to Canada Greener Homes. So you'll see that I had started work on the application on November the 1st. I submitted it once we had all our choices made on November the 19th. We had the work done in December. And then because I screwed up, it wasn't until March the 12th that we actually requested the funds. The other thing you'll notice is that while we were approved for 7,400, the amount that we were actually able to get loaned was 7,352. Someone, I'll take responsibility, hadn't kept the invoices from the do-it-myself work that I had done. So, hey, it's only $50, but if it was something bigger, it would have been more significant. So keep all your receipts. And because of that, not only did I not get the $50, but there was an extra weight from Canada Greener Homes saying, hey, you screwed up. As you may know, we rely on the data received from your post-evaluation to determine the completed retrofits. Well, there's a discrepancy in the final loan amount, and that then makes it fall into this pool for further investigation. So I had to reply saying what I had done, why I hadn't submitted some of the receipts. And that led to a fairly short delay. But it wasn't until March the 20th that I got the email saying, we're pleased to advise you that, yes, indeed, you've been approved. It'll be deposited within 10 days. Well, it wasn't until the 10th day that it actually showed up in our account. And that was fine. So then I was about to claim the $600 rebate. I actually asked Tom Knezevich, so do you know anything about how to claim that? I was planning to send, or I did send an email to Reep to ask. Turns out the rebate is no longer worth it, or no longer available. So I questioned whether getting the loan was actually worth it. I had to pay $870 to have the pre and post evaluation. Well, it's a fairly simple, way to figure it out. In my case, we had the money, so we could pay for the retrofits up front. But I'm actually in the wrong one. If I had to borrow to pay for the retrofits, assuming that I had to pay 10% interest on the money that I was borrowing, my monthly payment would be $97. With the federal loan, it was only $61. The monthly difference is $36. And over 10 years, that's $4,300. Well, clearly, the cost of the pre and post evaluations at $870 meant that getting the federal loan was valuable in terms fiscally valuable. Similarly, if I, in my case, just wanted to invest the $7,000 that we got, assuming I had an investment of 3%, I'm not gaining quite as much, but it's still over $300 of value to me at this point. So just in summary, it's going to take some time. Pay attention to the details and watch carefully. If things aren't going at the speed that you are thinking or that has been promised, then actually reach out and see whether or not folks are able to help you out in some way or other. So thanks very much. Happy to answer any questions when we get to that stage.
Thanks, Steve, for telling us about the loan application process and helping us know what steps to kind of be aware of so that we navigate through it a little smoothly.
Yeah.
So we'll Q&A will come up, and hope you can remain available for that. I want to introduce our final speaker tonight. Andrew Sheedle is from Reep Green Solutions. Andrew has been a registered energy advisor for more than 2 years and has conducted many home energy evaluations. His interest and knowledge of heat pumps started with researching heat pump options for his own home. It was the year 2019, before heat pumps were commonly known as a viable alternative to heating with fossil fuels. There were no rebate programs, and few contractors had substantial experience with the technology. But Andrew had experience analyzing data and assessing environmental impacts in environmental consulting. After analyzing efficiency, weather data, costs, and other details, he chose a heat pump that was installed in January 2020. His family has enjoyed the steady, even heating ever since. Andrew is glad to help others select suitable heat pumps for their homes, and he's here tonight to tell us about the heat pump right sizing service that is available to homeowners through Reep Green Solutions.
Yes, I work with Reep Green Solutions as an energy advisor, and so as I expect many of you know, we do the home energy evaluations, as Steve talked about, part of that process. And I came to this out of my interest in heat pumps, actually, because I learned that, you know, understanding how heat pumps fit with the building is critical. And so while being an energy advisor, I've also done a little bit of additional work for some of our customers to help them pick a heat pump. Not everybody wants that service or needs it, but it can be helpful. And you know, I've enjoyed helping some folks. And I think what I want to focus on right now today is that we have what we call a heat pump right sizing service. And this is a new thing for us this year. It's different than what I have done with customers in the past. It adds on to an energy evaluation and does a few things that that are not part of a normal energy evaluation. I think go ahead and advance the slide, Neil, to the next one. So it turns out that a lot of heat pumps that are installed could be a little bit bigger, or in other words, they could be heat pumps that provide more heat at colder temperatures. And this is not to say that they're necessarily a poor heating system. I don't want any of you to get that impression. It's more that if our objectives are to put as much of our heating as possible over to the heat pump and not use alternate sources of energy, then we want to size them as large as possible, or essentially right size them. So, and I'll highlight that Reep Green Solutions works in partnership with an organization called Green Communities Canada. They are our window to Natural Resources Canada for conducting energy evaluations. And they also, their people trained me to be an energy advisor. So they've got technical depth, and they developed this service. And this, so I have trained for this, and one of our other energy advisors has as well. And we also have an advisor that works for us as an independent contractor, and he's done that as well. And he tends to serve Guelph area and so on, that direction. So what we do here, well, I'm going to give a little more background just quickly on, you know, why does it come to be that a heat pump isn't sized bigger? Well, we we want multiple quotes typically, and that's been discussed here. You know, both Heather mentioned this, and Steve highlighted why. You know, you can get different prices, and sometimes you just connect better with someone. You know, and you feel you got to have a comfort level too, and you also, people find that they get some fairly technically different looking results too. But one of the reasons is there's a consistency though, that they might tend to be a little bit smaller, which essentially gets around needing to do some design work. And if you think about it, if you're giving multiple quotes or getting multiple quotes, that means the contractors are not getting all the jobs that they quote. And so they can't go around doing this design work then as part of preparing quotes. It's a little more involved than would be fair to expect them to do on such a regular basis. Now, you know, I think it's fair to ask to, you know, step up a bit, but there really is a gap there. And so it's also true that it's been standard practice that, and this is sort of, there are requirements. They need to take responsibility for meeting the heating needs of the home. And if they're installing air conditioning, to meeting the cooling needs or the air conditioning needs. And it is okay though, for them to replace the equipment that is there with equipment of the same size. So if you have a furnace and air conditioner, they can come in and put in the same size furnace and the same size air conditioner, and it's not really required. They're not required to assess the building. So that's been standard practice for a long time. And so they simply do the same thing as one potential pathway. They do the same thing, but take a rebate eligible heat pump and put it in at air conditioner size. And if it paired with a gas furnace, it'll switch over to the gas furnace when the heating requirement is too much for the heat pump. That is a fine and viable heating system. If we're not thinking about fuel switching specifically, it's not to say that it's wrong in a fundamental way. So if you've had a heat pump installed and that's sort of where you're at, it's fine. You've got a big chunk of your heat switched over to heat pump. It's fine. It's what it is. But what can we do that's a little bit better? So there are three parts to our heat pump rate sizing service. First, when we do an energy evaluation, we are measuring your house, we are assessing the insulation levels, and we are doing a blower door test to establish the air leakage. That is all the required information to figure out the heating requirement of the house and the air conditioning requirement, or as we say, the heating and cooling loads. We just need to make that into the standard. There is a CSA standard for this, and we can do that. We just have to not use the exact same software that we use for energy evaluations, but we use basically the same information and even most of the same stuff. And then we get you those loads, and that is in a report that gets passed. You can pass on to the contractor, and they have that to work with. The second thing that we do is, and this is an extra piece of measurement that we do then, we assess the air ducts. So we measure the air pressures and the airflow in the air ducts, and we determine the maximum airflow that your air ducts can handle, and there's also some air pressure information, and that information can go to the contractor as well and give them something to go on there. It's because the air ducts are a thing that that's a major thing that they're concerned about. If they upsize the heat pump, can the air ducts handle it? And that's why Heather mentioned, you know, are they even looking at your air ducts, right? So we can this gives them something to go on. It's not a design. It's not, because their equipment has certain specifications that, you know, they have to take into account, right? So it's just information for them, and then they have to take it and go with it from there. The last thing we do, and you know, I'd say this is one where we assess the electrical capacity of the house. This is one where we of course really have to defer to an electrician at the end of the day, but it can at least give you and the HVAC contractor an idea of what there is to work with. We use a standard some standard calculations for sizing the electrical service for a house based on the size of the house and how many different electrical appliances, large electric appliances that you have. So we can say, okay, this looks like you have this much, if you have 100 amps and it comes out at 70 amps, we say, okay, you've got 30 amps, that kind of thing. We also just take a quick look at the panel to see if there's any space available or if there's something that might become available. For example, you might have a breaker for an air conditioner. Well, if you're putting in a heat pump instead of the air conditioner, that's of course available. So we do these things, and it's a simple two-page report that then informs you, and you can pass to the contractor. So that's something that I wanted to tell you about. And I think go ahead and advance the slide. I think you saw this at our intro, just to make you aware that we do home energy efficiency work. We also have a kind of what we call a green infrastructure area, where we do help folks with their yards and stormwater, and we have challenges around waste reduction. And are the slides and the other slides included, Neil? So this is just a few pictures of heat pumps, just to show that they're all shapes and sizes. The one on the left is kind of a commercial size heat pump, but also just to note that what's inside counts too, and the actual performance numbers that come out of a heat pump are different. It's one is not the same as another. So in the end, we can also offer services to sort of analyze the heat pump that has been proposed, for example, or a couple of them, to see how it would actually perform in your house. So yeah, and that's me. This is at a church. I was involved in this a project to switch a church to all electric heating systems. So that's the smaller of the two heat pumps in that case. I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Andrew, for giving us a good overview of the heat pump right sizing services offered by Reep Green Solutions. We're going to move on to the Q&A part of our webinar. And please remember, well, I think you found out the chat isn't open. So if you haven't yet put your question into the chat, please retype it into the Q&A ASAP. We'll answer as many questions as we can. We'll not be recommending specific manufacturers or models of heat pumps, water heaters, or stoves. There are independent sources such as Consumers Reports magazine where you can obtain specific recommendations. If we get close to 9 p.m. and we still have some questions to answer, we'll continue until 9:10 at the latest. And if there are any questions we're not able to answer tonight, we'll do our best to get the answers and send them out to everyone in an email. Thanks, Diane Stanley Horn, who has been monitoring the questions coming in from participants through our Q&A. With the question, here's Diane.
All right, thanks, Neil. And thanks to all the presenters. That was a very informative presentation. Much appreciated. We do have quite a lot of questions, which is fantastic. And so hopefully we can try to get through as many as possible and keep the answers concise. And then we can, as Neil said, follow up if we don't get through all of them by the end. So I'd like to start with a couple of high-level questions before we dig into some details. And I guess these will be primarily for Heather, but others, please feel free to jump in as well as relevant. So the first one is, I understand that some electricity is generated from fossil fuels. So how does it help to go electric?
Absolutely. Some of our electricity is coming from fossil fuels, and more of it will be coming from fossil fuels in the shorter term, which is a bit of a concern. But still, the majority of our electricity here in Ontario is clean electricity. So most of it is coming from hydro and nuclear electricity, which has zero emissions. And so you absolutely are ahead of the game in Ontario when you switch from gas heating to an electric heat pump.
Right. Thank you. And on a related note, do we have enough electricity if everyone switches to these new methods?
So there's no question that we're going to have to build out more electricity generation as we electrify transportation and industry and building heat. Government is absolutely aware of this. The Ontario Energy Board, the IESO, they are absolutely aware of this. They are planning for it. And we doubled our electricity generation here in Canada every decade for a good bit of the last century. I'm not going to say numbers now because I'm probably going to get them wrong, but there were many, many decades last century where we doubled our electricity supply at least every 10 years. We can do this again. Renewable electricity has never been cheaper. It's cheaper now to put in new solar or wind with storage than it is to build new gas-powered plants, than it is to build new nuclear, than it is any of those other solutions. We can do this. And we also, as we electrify, we're going to get a little smarter about how we use electricity. Right now, we have big peaks in the summertime, and we have to have enough generation capacity to meet the peaks, even though a lot of that generation capacity isn't used the rest of the year. Smart people are working on developing systems that will allow us to spread out our electricity use over the year so that we don't have big peaks. And when we build out new generation, we're using it for more of the year. So we're going to get smarter about how we use electricity in future, and that's going to make it a lot easier to electrify.
Okay, thank you. Can you speak a little bit about the ductless heat pumps, and especially where you've got multiple exterior and/or interior units?
Okay, so these are called mini splits or multi-splits. So the outside part looks exactly the same as a regular air source heat pump. So it's the boxes, and Andrew showed us some really great examples. But on the inside, if you don't have ductwork, so if you're starting, for example, with electric resistance heating, the really good option for you, heat pump option for you, is a mini split. And what you will have is a cassette somewhere in the main rooms of your home. And it comes in a variety of different formats. It can look like a box that's hanging on the wall. It can look like a box that is on the wall, but at ground level. Some of them are actually embedded in the ceiling or in the wall, so that's a little more hidden. And what these do is, instead of releasing the heat in wintertime into the air handler, they're releasing the heat into the room with a little fan. Or in the summertime, they're picking up the heat from the room and moving it outside. So that's a mini split. And a multi-split is when you have several of these cassettes all hooked up to the same outside unit, or you can have several, each inside unit connected to its own outside unit. And what works best for your home will depend on a variety of factors. This is one of the things you're going to talk to your installer about. And maybe Andrew.
Okay, and do you have any recommendations for a house with hot water radiators with a boiler?
Yes, so there's where you're looking for an air to water heat pump. And these are very common in Europe because they use a lot of radiative heat. They're less common here in North America, but there are more and more manufacturers that are producing them for North American markets. So whereas they were really, really hard to get a few years ago, they are now easier to find. They're still more expensive than an air-to-air heat pump. So a conventional air source heat pump is air-to-air, but air-to-water do exist, and air-to-water can if it's designed, also provide your domestic hot water, so hot water for your showers and things like that. So that helps to make that investment a little more appealing. In the longer term, some of the really exciting research that's happening in the heat pump field, and I get really excited about some of this stuff, is heat pumps that are air to water to air. So they are taking advantage of the same technology, transferring heat to water, and then basically getting your fan to blow over it to release the heat. But it's the same technology, it's pretty much the same setup as air to water. But it has a bunch of advantages in terms of the new refrigerants that are coming out, in terms of ductwork compatibility, that makes me think they're going to become a lot more common, and which will drive down the cost of these air to water heat pumps. At least that's my hope.
Right. Well, that's good.
And just wanted to highlight, no matter what you're heating with today, there is a heat pump alternative available today.
Right. So that is fantastic news. There is a perception, I'm not sure, I guess it may be just dependent on the circumstances, but that cold climate heat pumps really only work to about -15 and not to the really low temperatures that we get in Ontario. And so in this question, if you need a backup and you have an electric option, then it, you know, when there is extreme cold, the gas can be, the cost can be really high for electric. And how would you, like, would you recommend a gas backup, or would you recommend, does it depend on the settings and the size and everything for the heat pump?
Okay, so the very first thing I want to say is there absolutely are some very good and affordable air-to-air heat pumps available that work down to -30. We don't get -30 in this region. Like the coldest we get is like, well, our design temperature, which means the temperature at which the, temperature is above it 99% of the time, is -21, I believe, in this region. Could be, Andrew might know specifically. It's either -19 or -21. We don't get -30. So these heat pumps not only are very efficient down to -30, but they can also move a lot of heat. It gets harder for them to move heat when it's colder outside, because they're pulling heat from the outside, but there's still heat even at -30. So it gets harder. They aren't able to move as much heat at -30, but they're still able to move a lot of heat at -30. The technology really has improved in the last 10 years. So in this region, absolutely, you can go 100% electric. Your heat pump installer, if you're going 100% electric, chances are they will put in electric backup heater. That's a just in case measure. Ours has never gone on, except during defrost, but that's just a comfort issue. If you're going with a cheaper heat pump, or if you're going with a smaller sized heat pump for a variety of different reasons, you may have a crossover temperature. So that's the temperature where your heat pump can't keep up anymore with the heating needs of the house. And that's where it needs a backup. If you're going all electric, you should be asking your installer to ensure the backup is supplementing the heat pump. So it's saying your heat pump keeps running because it is the most efficient thing that you have. It's just not moving enough heat at a certain temperature. And that's sizing. If it were sized bigger, it could move more heat. But for some reasons, you may want to size it smaller. You want the electric resistance to top that up to where you need it. And then it's not going to be anywhere near as expensive as 100% electric. Also keep in mind, we rarely get temperatures below -15 in this region, and we're getting less of them with climate change, as far as I can tell. So, if you are requiring backup electric resistance heating for a couple of hours a year, this shouldn't be a big deal. That's a couple of dollars. That's shouldn't be a big concern. But, talk to your installer, talk to somebody like Andrew about what your priorities are and what what your home is suited for, the ductwork and the heating loads and things like that.
Okay. So another question is, I've heard that some heat pumps can be quite noisy, especially when it's very cold outside. When I'm researching what heat pump to buy, what's an acceptable or recommended decibel noise level? And maybe you could also speak to the other things that can contribute to noise. I think you mentioned size in your...
Yeah, so I don't actually have a decibel level off the top of my head. Andrew might have that at his fingertips. And certainly Andrew might be able to add some things to what I'm saying, but if your heat pump is oversized for the ductwork, so you've sized the heat pump to provide all of the heating you need, but the ductwork actually isn't big enough to handle moving that much air, it can be noisy. So that's noise inside, that's noise around. You're going to hear like the the noise when the furnace comes on and you can hear it. That just gets louder if you're trying to move more air than your ducts are designed to hold. So that can be a cause of noise. Noise was a concern for many years, and so a lot of manufacturers have really invested in making their heat pumps quieter. Many of the cold climate heat pumps are actually rated to be quieter than an air conditioner. So that's good news. One of the other things that can contribute to it being noisy, most heat pumps, like the outside unit, is installed on a raised platform on the ground. You want it raised up because if it gets covered in snow, it can't work, right? So this is one of the things with a heat pump. You want to make sure that you clear the snow around the outside units whenever you get a snow. But if you have a gas furnace, you also want to make sure that you're clearing the space around the vents, or your gas furnace won't work. So not terribly different as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, it's raised up. In some cases, what installers will do instead is mount it on the wall. So they're mounting it on the exterior wall. And then as the heat pump runs, it vibrates a little bit, and that noise gets transmitted through the wall. So that's going to be noisier than a heat pump that is mounted on a platform instead. So those are the ones that I'm aware of. I'm just going to...
Yeah, Andrew might have something to say.
Yeah.
I can offer a couple of comments. I don't have a ready number. We know that decibels, as they increase, it's not just linear. It really increases when you're seeing numbers of decibels. So if you look up the heat pump that you might be buying and find some specifications, or if you ask your installer about it, you might be given a number. One thing I'll clarify is there are two kinds of numbers. One is called sound pressure, and it's measured as if you have with a microphone, presumably a certain distance away. I think 3 feet might be the standard. And then another type of sound number is the sound power, and that's the total sound. And so that number will be higher. So you got to watch, you're comparing apples to apples, so to speak. So if you're looking at sound pressure on one heat pump and total sound power on another heat pump, one will look louder than the other, but it might even be the other way around. But and that's just maybe a question you could ask the contractor, right? Like, is that sound pressure or sound power, right? The other thing to be thinking about is there are best practices for where to locate your heat pump. Directly underneath your bedroom window is probably a bad place to put it. Now, I actually did help someone buy a heat pump, and it went directly outside of a bay window on the bedroom that she slept in. And I paid a lot of attention to the specifications, the sound specs, and worked, talked to the installer and said, okay, can we make sure it's a little ways away? Like these ones that discharge from the side, some of them only need maybe 10 inches of clearance from the wall, but we put this thing more like 18 inches away, or maybe 20 or something like that, just in case I needed to, the fallback was to build a structure or something to deflect the sound away from the window, which in that case would have worked. And, it's case by case and how much effort you want to put into this. But that was a fallback. And then she put flower beds around it and made it look very nice, even though it was sitting out a little ways. Yeah, so those are some comments.
Okay. And Andrew, while you're here, there's one directed specifically to you. So does Reep do right sizing for air to water heat pumps as well?
I'm going to say no. That's outside of what we could do. Except, well, see, here's the thing. The program, it's actually, there's a pilot program of this, which is intended for your typical ducted house with, a furnace, for example, and where you intend to put the heat pump as a central air handler unit or furnace and coil attached to that ductwork. However, the heating and cooling loads, they're whole house loads. So, we can give you that whole house heating load and cooling load. If you get into any room by room, those individual units on a multi-split, or if your air to water system is more elaborate and you need to size individual radiators and things like that, we're not going to be giving you quite as much detailed information as you need. So we could do it part way maybe, but it's not really geared for that.
Okay. And can you give a rough ballpark for the cost of the service for?
Yeah, so what we're doing at this point is, the initial evaluation cost is $530 to include the heat pump right sizing service, puts that up to $600. So it's a $70 additional cost. And that gets you, we do the extra work on site and we generate that report for you with the heating loads, the duct assessment and the electrical assessment. It does not include the additional consultation of assessing, the quoted heat pumps, but that would be a further cost and optional. If somebody has had an evaluation done already, we're working with probably about $180 to come back to the house and add that on.
Okay, great. So how do you get a historical load calculation?
Smart meter, right, Heather? I'll let you speak to it. Is that?
That's usually done by an electrician. And you can sort of, I don't know if it saves money, but it can save time. You can reach out directly to your local electrical utility and ask them for historical data for your home. So they will provide you with all of the information about how much electricity you use, as well as the hourly peaks. You have to make sure that you're letting them know you're doing it for a historical load calculation. And then you share that with an electrician. The electrician assesses those loads. They look at what types of equipment you have in your home, and then they will make a recommendation as to how high you can go with that electrical panel. So that's the process, as I understand it. I haven't done it, but that's as I understand it, the process.
Okay. There was a question about finding a good heat pump water heater. Are there good resources to look for a good heat pump water heater?
So the Canada's Home Electrification Toolkit provides some resources on finding looking for heat pump water heaters. Heat pump water heaters are now available through most big box stores. And there are a growing number of installers that will install heat pump water heaters. So this is again something where a few years ago it may have been a little more difficult, but they have become far more widespread. Heat pump water heaters sales are ramping up so fast in the United States. It's absolutely stunning.
And how do you set or program a water heater to heat at night?
An electric water heater, that you need a timer. So there are commercially available timers that work with water heaters. If you're having an electrical water heater installed, just talk to your installer at the time about putting in a timer at the same time. Otherwise, they are available. I think I saw one in Canadian Tire and some of the big box stores. They do sell them. You are looking for ones that are rated for the electrical use that you have. So you don't want to put a 120 volt, 20 amp water timer on a 240 volt, 40 amp. I mean, it probably wouldn't work at all, but you want to have it match. Is what I'm saying. You're looking for it to match the voltage and the amps.
Okay.
Be designed for that purpose.
Okay. And are the refrigerants safe and are they easy to get if needed? Or is that something that you would maintain or is it something that would be serviced?
So hopefully, once you install an air conditioner or a heat pump, you're never going to have to worry about the refrigerant again until it reaches end of life. So that's what we're hoping for. And the better the quality of the install, the more likely that's going to happen. But refrigerants can leak. And so if you have a leak, you'll need a top up. All refrigerants in use are required to pass health and safety standards. They can't be flammable. They are safe. They cannot be ozone depleting. And we're currently in the process of phasing out refrigerants that are bad for climate change. So some of these refrigerants are thousands of times worse than carbon dioxide in terms of causing climate change. So not a good thing when they leak. The good news is we don't use a lot of refrigerants in a system. So I looked at this a couple of years ago and I said, worst case scenario, all of the refrigerant leaks out of your heat pump. In Ontario, less than 2 years of operating that heat pump and you're already saving more emissions than those refrigerants would have caused. So we really should not be worrying too much about refrigerants. But even if they do leak, you call your installer, they figure out where the leak is, they repressurize the system and they seal up the leak so that it never happens again. And even as we're phasing out some of those high global warming potential refrigerants, there is a provision that we will continue to have certain levels. We will continue to stock enough refrigerant to repair leaks, even if we no longer manufacture heat pumps with those refrigerants. So this should not be a concern for homeowners. This is something, that the industry is got a lot of buzz about this right now because we're in the process of phasing things down, but this is not something that homeowners need to be worried about.
Okay.
Just noticing that we're getting at 9 o'clock. We'll wind up around 9:10. Thanks.
Okay. So we have time for a few more questions. I'm planning to get off gas completely, but I've heard that it's very hard to terminate an account with your gas company. Is this true? And will the gas company charge me a fee to terminate my account? And how much would they charge if so?
Okay. So There are some gas companies that have tried to charge fees, and I guess some people have probably paid them. We got a lawyer to weigh in on this, and his advice was a utility cannot charge somebody for not using their service. And anyone I've talked to who has run into this problem where the gas company has wanted to charge them for disconnecting and has used that framing, has pointed out, you can't charge me to not use your service, was able to proceed without any problems. So that the gas company backed down. It's disappointing that they're still trying to fob this on customers.
Right. Okay, related question. We plan to replace our gas furnace with an electric heat pump, but we want to keep our gas fireplace. Will Enbridge charge us any extra fees for the gas we use for the fireplace once we no longer have a gas furnace?
No, you'd still be paying the same rate for the gas that you use, but you will be paying $30 a month just to be connected. So just keep that in mind. That's $350+ per year that you're paying just to be connected.
My gas stove and fireplace are relatively new. It'd be a luxury to replace them, but one that I'm certainly pondering. Given that they are newish and functional, my impulse would be to donate them to a local charity like the Restore. However, that seems unethical as they would then not be properly swapped out of the fossil fuel economy. Is it ethical? Is it an ethical option to junk them?
Well, okay, the ethics I think are going to have to leave with you, but I do want to point out that chances are the Restore wouldn't take your gas furnace because there would be liability issues. And even getting your gas furnace removed is going to come with a cost. You're better off just replacing it when you are ready to do so, and recycling, having them recycle the metal.
I will likely be replacing my 190-liter home natural gas water heater in the near future. 2 senior adults living in the house. What's the best green option to replace the gas unit? Electric water heater, tankless, heat pump, or other?
If it's 2 people and you don't use a lot of water, hot water, your lowest cost option may just be a regular electric tank water heaters. That's what we opted for in our home. I guess we're a little unusual. We don't seem to use as much hot water as other people. We have a 19-gallon, 19 times 4, 80-liter water heater. It is like half the size of a regular electric water heater, and it makes it easier to put it on a timer. And the electrical was much easier to do because it doesn't have the same amp draw. And we're fine. So, think a little bit about what your hot water needs are. Do you all shower and do laundry at the same time of the day? Does it have time to recover? But, an electric tank water heater is probably a great option. A heat pump water heater, it's going to be more efficient, but if you're not using a lot of hot water, you may not recover that cost. A larger family with using a lot more hot water, the savings from the heating of the water may be enough to offset the increased cost. But with 2 people, I'm guessing you're probably better off with just a regular tank.
Okay. How does one do a heating load calculation? And how will I know if the installer's done this versus just doing a quick calculation on the back of an envelope?
Heating load calculation is not a DIY type thing in general. Ways that an installer can do it is if they're looking or trying to assess the insulation in and around the house, if they're looking at historical gas bills, getting measurements of the whole home, those are the types of things that they would need in order to do a heating load calculation. But there's a reason why Andrew is offering this service, and it's because it's not a simple thing to assess on your own, unless you're very handy and electric and engineering minded and do a bunch of research first.
Okay. Are there good Canadian manufacturers and components?
Most heat pumps are made in China. There are a bunch in the States. There are some Canadian ones. I'm not sure I would call them one among the better products. And I'm sure it's probably like cars in that bits of them are still coming from the States. So not a clear answer on that one. And it may not be one where you want to prioritize made in Canada.
Right. Hopefully they won't go up in cost as well.
Yeah.
So how much more would we expect to pay per year if we change from a gas water heater to an electric water heater?
Yeah, I can't tell you that right off. Gas prices changed today, and that was gas prices change every 3 months. And special this time is we also lost the carbon pricing, so that is going to very much change the economics, and I haven't redone the calculation.
Okay. Here's a simpler one, I think. For the combined washer dryer, how can you operate it while you're away at work? I was always told never to run them when you're away. Same for a dishwasher.
Oh, well, I run things like that when I'm away. It's designed where it just programmed, like you put your clothes in and you program, I want to do a wash with, warm water with an extra rinse with a, whatever you prefer. And then you program in what you want for the dryer. There's a little thing where you put in your detergent. There's another thing for your fabric softener or whatever you put in. Like, it's got drawers for everything. And then you just press start, and there's nothing to do after you press start until it's done a couple hours later. And to me, that means you can walk away.
Right. So I know you spoke to this in your presentation, but there's a few questions related to the same point, so it'd be nice to reiterate it again. So what happens when there's a power outage and, if you're giving up gas?
So the key thing to keep in mind is your gas furnace and the majority of gas water heaters are not going to work in a power outage. And that's for safety reasons. We don't want carbon monoxide in your home. Now, the exception is many gas fireplaces can run without electricity, and gas stoves can run without electricity. So you do have an advantage there. And that is perhaps a consideration for you if you live in areas that routinely get power outages for extended periods. But that's not true for most local people who live in the urban parts. When we get power outages, they don't generally last for more than, most power outages last for less than a minute, and they just enough to mess up your clocks. And, occasionally we'll get one that lasts for a couple of hours, and it's really no different in a home that's electrified versus not. In the long term, this is where the batteries in our cars are going to step up. We're just going to plug our homes, our heat pumps, our stoves, etc., into the battery in our car and run it off that. But that's longer term.
Yeah. Do you have any sense of when that might be coming?
I probably shouldn't weigh in on that, but sooner rather than later. I mean, the technology is there. We can technically do it, but it's more regulations and cost and manufacture automotive manufacturers being willing to invest in it.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Fantastic to be able to speak with you and have you answer questions. We have a few more, but we're going to need to follow up after the fact on those ones because we've run out of time. And I'll pass it back to Neil now.
Yes, thanks to everyone who submitted a question tonight. And for the unanswered ones, we'll do our best to get the answers and send them out to you by an email. So once again, we thank our speakers, Heather, Steve, and Andrew, as well as our supporters for this event, the Township of Wilmot, Kindred Credit Union, and Future Ground Network. And a reminder that in 3 or 4 days, you're going to receive an email that will include a link to a recording of this webinar, a document listing a number of resources related to tonight's webinar, a link to the webinar feedback survey, if you haven't already done it tonight, and details regarding specific actions you can take to show solidarity with Indigenous members of our Waterloo region community. And finally, I thank you to everyone for participating tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar, have learned something, I know I have, and are now motivated to launch your journey to getting off gas. Thank you very much, and good night.